I'm delighted to introduce to you Karl Morris, a top mind coach that I've had the pleasure of working with now for the last few years. Met him first in Huddersfield Giants, and then we've done quite a lot of work together over the last few years, especially with my high level therapist mentorship group. And you told me a really good story a couple of years ago now about the cockpit analogy, and that's what that's what I'd love for you to share with the viewers this week.
Just wind back even from myself, Dave, just before I talk about that, is that, you know, in my previous incarnation coaching golfers, I look back with horror now that I had a kind of system in my mind that I assumed that because I thought that system was the right way to do it, that everybody who I gave lessons to, I used to try and make everybody do that system. Now, yeah, one or two people responded to that, but the vast majority got worse because I was trying to fit unique individuals into a cookie cutter system. And you mentioned the story there. There's a fabulous book called The End of Average by a guy called Todd Rose. And right at the beginning of the book, he talks about the US Air Force in the 1940s. And it was a period of time when you know, the aeroplanes, technology had improved leaps and bounds from kind of the First World War, from propeller planes to jet planes and things like that. But what was happening with the US Air Force, they were having lots and lots of what they call non-combat disasters. So planes were crashing, takeoff, landing, all the rest of it. And in the early days, what they did is try and identify why all that was happening, and they looked at the planes, and it wasn't really the planes. So then the next thing is it pilot error? Anyway, long story short, there was a genius called Gilbert Daniels. This was in the day of single cockpit planes. And what he did was actually look at what seems the most obvious thing, the cockpit of the plane. And the cockpit dated back to the 20s, where what they did, they actually fitted the cockpit for the average pilot. Now, the average pilot was built around 10 dimensions, arm length, leg length, all this kind of stuff. And what Gilbert Daniels did, I think there was something like 4,000 pilots. And he actually looked to see how many of those 4,000 pilots fitted those average dimensions. Now, as a percentage figure, what would you say would people would fit into that?
50?
You know, most people say 50, 30, 20. It blew me away. Not one of the 4,000 pilots fitted the average dimension. So again, now what seems so ludicrously obvious, instead of having a fixed cockpit where everybody tried to fit into that and it was causing so many of these issues, he was the one who instigated that the pilot got into the cockpit and then was able to adjust everything to fit them as a unique individual. And I think it's just such a great metaphor for lots of things, that whether it's coaching a sport or working in the physio world, you know, you haven't just got a knee in front of you that has a generic treatment. You've got a very, very unique human being in front of you. And unless you find out about that unique human being, you're putting them in that cockpit that won't fit.
Exactly. And that's very, very powerful. So how do we apply this in the real world? Are you guilty of maybe having 2 or 3 exercises and you use those exercises for every knee pain or for every back pain patient? Or are we actually understanding the person in front of us and adjusting exercises, which you can finish the story in a second with what they did with the cockpit, and actually make those exercises specific to the person and their needs? So you adjust your exercise selection to fit the person rather than having a set way. And the other thing I didn't mention is Karl's coached 6 golf major winners, worked with Tom Eaton, the England goalkeeper, those cricketers that I never know the name of, Vaughan, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I do know who Michael Vaughan is, but you know, and Karl has to adjust his way to meet the person, and we do too. So
I find that one of the most important things. My sort of mantra is now, whenever I'm working with somebody, it's not about finding the way, it's about finding their way. And you have to dig a little bit more under the surface to find out what their way needs to be. you know, as opposed to, I used to think that good coaching was about giving people information. It's not. It's about asking good questions, which I'm sure we'll touch on in future episodes. But as I say, the end of Average story was, the seemingly so obvious thing that the pilot could get into the cockpit and various adjustment buttons that he could create his personal environment. 4,000 pilots and not one fitted the average dimension. It just is such a powerful message for virtually all of the things that we do.
Brilliant. And that's going to take us nicely into next week, Karl, where you've agreed to come back in, and we're going to start to apply this and put these pieces together, where we're going to talk about the subjective assessment, where we're going to start to identify that person's needs and what they want. So Karl, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And I'm looking forward to the brain booster segments. Absolutely.